In this video, we're going to talk about two different types of plots and plotline development. And plot typically refers to the path or trajectory of a story from start to finish. So the first one that we're going to look at is actually the easier one. It's the genre plot. And many people confuse the term genre to mean a type of story or a category of story, such as horror or romance or historical fiction, but that's actually not how we define genre. Genre is actually a storyline that is driven by action. Whereas the next plot that we'll look at in just a few moments is literary, and literary plots are driven by character, which is a very subtle difference. So a genre plot, because it's driven by action, is actually much easier for you to plot out. And just as the term plot would apply to plotting a course in a map, it also applies that way in a story. You can actually draw out a plot. So a genre plot is fairly linear. And it moves from a baseline up an arch to the resolution. And they typically start off with some sort of scene, and that scene has a mood. And for the sake of an example, in this particular scenario, we'll say that that mood is joy. That at the beginning of this particular story that we're plotting, this genre action-based story, the mood is joy. And there's happiness, there's sunshine, it's summer, people are in love, people are happy. And as it moves, more and more information gets revealed. And as you can see, it's moving up. So tension is being developed. And tension means stress or stressful situations. And the way that we create tension is by slowing scenes down, by kind of bottlenecking the direction of our story so that we move into tighter and tighter scenarios. And we'll actually have a whole lesson on creating tension in just a moment. But as you can see, you're kind of moving up this scale. So it starts off with joy, and it's gradually moving away from joy up to a very tense, dramatic moment, which would be the climax. And just after the climax, it comes down a little bit to the resolution. And resolution does not necessarily mean a happy ending. Resolution means the point at which the situation, the climax, the problem that led us up this arch is resolved. It's finished. It's completed. So we start with this mood, joy, and more information is being revealed. And that typically refers to a problem. There's some kind of problem or barrier or obstacle that your characters need to overcome. And as they move along the plot, there are various elements that introduce their relationships, whatever the problem might be, and tension creates a situation where the reader needs to know how they're going to resolve that problem. Ultimately, we reach the climax where something dramatic happens, some situation where these characters have kept moving more and more toward the bottleneck, where they have no choice but to, in some capacity, confront or face that problem head on. And then after the climax, which is the exciting moment of the story, you have your resolution. For better or for worse, something happens. So in this scenario, because I want to go back to the fact that we started with this mood, this scene of joy, when you're plotting a genre plot, and really any plot, you're moving to a place of opposites. It's like a spectrum. So if you start with joy, you have these joyous scenes, you're referring to things that make people happy. Then at the end, you're going to have the opposite of joy. So that could be a number of things. It could be sorrow, or it could be death, as we saw in the cutouts. So we start with perhaps romance, and we end with death. And you can work differently. You can go in the opposite direction even, and start with death and move toward sorrow. So when you're looking at a genre plot, remember that it's somewhat linear, and each step along the way from the beginning scene to the end scene is moving upward. It's gradually pushing you to more and more tense situations. As you read it, you're feeling more and more tension, you're feeling more and more connection, and you're gradually moving toward this inevitable climax, this place where you're going to face, or the characters, you're going to see through the character's eyes, where you're going to face the problem head on. So that is a genre plot. Now let's look at literary plot lines. Now, literary plot lines, unlike genre plot lines, literary plot lines are driven by character and character choices. So you really have to understand your character's unique psychology. You have to know your character better than you know yourself. And that's actually one of the reasons I encourage you not to use yourself as a character, because you know yourself so well and so differently than what your readers would understand. They will struggle to actually see who you are because you'll leave out some of those important details. So a literary plot moves through character psychology. Now let's just review. The genre plot is, of course, one perfect arch. And what propels a genre plot is action. So you have these individual actions where somebody gets hit by a car, and that person then has to keep running away from the mobsters. And because the mobsters are chasing them, that person has to keep running away until they find a safe house. And then ultimately, the mobsters confront them, and you either have life or death. So this is a steady trajectory, the genre plotline, and it's done using action. Actions are what move the plot forward. What's different about a literary plotline is that you have a character who can make different choices about where the plotline goes. And it depends on the choices that the character makes, how that plot line is developed. So you've got this individual character who comes along, and this individual character perhaps interacts with another individual character, and they each have a unique set of traits, and one of them is going to have a fatal flaw, or they're both going to have some kind of critical fatal flaw, and they're both going to have some strengths and weaknesses, just like people in real life. And then let's say that the choice that this woman makes, because she's got a history where she lost a child and a dog, she decides that she actually doesn't want to be with the man anymore, and suddenly she's sad, and she's alone. And as she's thinking about things, she becomes stronger, she joins a help group, she makes different choices, she meets different people, she develops friendships, and through that strength she decides, oh hey, we can be friends again. And then along comes our ending, and the two are back together and living happily ever after. So as you can see, a literary plot actually can move differently than the arch that you're used to in the action-based plot, because it's based on the individual choices that the character or characters that you're focusing on create. When you're thinking about your literary plot or the plot for your short story, you want to make sure that you are driving it by character and by character choices, because it is the character that your reader is going to connect with. Your reader needs to feel a connection to them socially and psychologically, and if they don't feel that connection, then your plot is going nowhere. Now, if you look again at the action plot, even the best genre stories with all of this tension are still driven by good character. I want you to think about Harry Potter or Star Wars, some of the most famous stories that we've ever heard. The reason why they work so well is because that character of Harry Potter, the sadness of him, the orphan that he is, the choices that he makes, the situations that he is put in, we can believe them because they are psychologically sound. They fit with him as a person. And so even though those storylines are genre and they are propelled by action, Snape does this, Draco Malfoy does that, and Harry has no choice but to keep running, and then he ultimately makes the polyjuice potion. Because those actions propel him, we can see the choice he makes along this trajectory, and we recognize that that choice makes sense. A literary plot, which is something like the movie American Beauty, a literary plot is driven entirely by character choice. And there is not necessarily any action that precipitates that choice. It occurs kind of intrinsically or inside the mind. So think about these two different plot structures, and your assignment is to take an episode of popular television or a popular film or a popular book or even comic book, and I want you to do what I did here and plot the plot line. Show me what that plot looks like. Draw it out and then mark it along the way. For instance, if we were doing Harry Potter, we would say at the beginning, Harry lives in a closet. And then there's the part where we're escalating and he gets invited to Hogwarts. So plot the plot line of one of these famous films or episodes. And your plot line may not look like this because your plot line may be more choice driven, and that's okay. I just want you to look at the plot of something popular and to share it. I'll have an assignment link in the course, but you can do just what I'm doing here. Take a photograph of it, draw it in black magic marker, and take a photograph and upload that, or you can do it on the web if you prefer to use graphic design software. I look forward to seeing what you produce.